Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Greentooth Gorge. Our first player today is Adila, playing as the Eldar Warlock. The Warlock is a tanky melee hero, or at least he can be. That's one thing you can do with him. You can also make him a spellcaster. You kind of get that versatility with it. Next up, we got Kisuke, or maybe it's Kisuke. I feel like it's Kisuke because I think it's like a Japanese name or something, and the U is like silent. I'm not sure, but I'm going to say Kisuke. Someone can correct me on that if you would like. Kisuke is playing as the Chaos Lord. Definitely a tanky melee hero. He's even got a spell himself with that Let the Galaxy Burn, which, although it's only one spell, it's a freaking good spell. So he actually has some ranged abilities, both with his ranged weapon as well as his ranged actual abilities. And just overall, a very powerful hero classically, and I say classically, and by that I mean in the Retribution era, one of the best overall heroes and very successful. We see a Heretic squad right here, took a Destructor to the face. No models actually died, but you can't really keep a squad of Heretics like that on the field. And that is definitely one of the big things the Warlock has in this matchup. That Destructor ability is incredibly, incredibly good against Heretics. And it's good. It's a good ability in general, but I'd say it's particularly good against Heretics just because they have the lowest per model health per game, and they really, as a melee unit and as the melee unit with the lowest per model health for any unit in the game, they really can't afford to be on the field too under strength. Especially without their aspiring champion. So that can be really, really scary, just that the Warlock can very quickly, or basically just use that ability, and right after using that ability, he's basically either forcing that Heretic squad off the field, if not putting it in a precarious situation where it might be lost entirely. Chaos Space Marines right here were not shooting at these Dire Avengers. They maybe should have been facing in a direction so that they could fire while still capturing. And they took some shots to the face without contesting that Dire Avenger fire, but eventually the Dire Avengers had to get out of there because the Dire Avengers just ultimately lose to the Chaos Space Marines. Just in Tier 1, with the Chaos Space Marines having as much health as they have and having that heavy infantry armor, whereas the Dire Avengers have only regular infantry armor and right now only 100 health per model. Just the head-to-head fight of the Chaos Space Marines versus the Dire Avengers is definitely going to favor the Chaos Space Marines. They will be able to just bleed models off of the Dire Avengers while probably not losing a model themselves. And they will probably only lose a model if they are overextended and in a situation where there are other units supporting as well. So Kisuke went for a pretty standard Chaos build. He's got the two Heretics, one Chaos Space Marine, and one Havoc. That is probably the most common Chaos build around these days, and it's very good for very many reasons. It's not as wreck heavy as getting double Chaos Space Marines. You can more quickly get out 3 squads out on the field while still having a balance between melee and ranged. The range damage output of this build overall is fairly low though, especially compared to most other races, since he really only has the squad of Chaos Space Marines as a really dedicated ranged unit. The Chaos Lord right now does not have the Combi Flamer, so he's only going to be doing about 14-point-something DPS out of his Twin-Link Bolter. And then we do have the Havoc, which is more of a control unit than a ranged DPS unit. But I think we've seen Adila harassing this back VP a lot with his Howling Banshees. They have been upgraded to have their aspect of strength, and right there, ooh, that's really, really bad positioning on those Banshees. So I actually thought what was going to happen was Kisuke was trying to, or what Kisuke should have done that could have been really, really effective was set up the Havoc, get the Banshees under suppression, and then just kind of wait there with the Heretics. Kind of basically goad them into retreating so that they have to retreat through Heretics and potentially get wiped. Now, Adila, I think, if anything, I think Adila was lucky not to get those Banshees wiped. And he was really unhappy about that, but I think he got out of there pretty well. He lost 3 Banshee models, which sounds bad, and it is a lot of bleed. but considering what could have happened, losing the entire Banshee squad so early on, I think he got away with murder, to be honest. We saw a grenade spike there, attempting to stop these heretics, but they do manage to dodge the grenade. And I actually like just the aggressive play of using double Aspiring Champion Heretics along with the Chaos Lord and using that Warship to get in very quickly against the Rangers. And the Rangers are... There was definitely a time when someone had said that Rangers can just be very, very effective against Chaos, although this was more in retail when they did not have Raptors, just because it's... just because the Rangers will very inevitably do attrition damage to basically to all the Chaos units, and that kind of forces the Chaos units into really advancing and making a push when they don't really have, certainly in retail, they didn't have as effective a way as kind of just breaking a line early on in Tier 1 the way they do now that they have Raptors. Chaos Lord, unfortunately, getting way overextended, does upgrade to the Combi Flamer, and I think we saw that in part because he wants to actually use the Combi Flamer as a source of anti-garrison. That's one of the advantages that the Chaos Lord has, I'd say a little bit over the Plague Champion and definitely over the Sorcerer, that he is probably the best early anti-garrison in terms of the overall convenience of the upgrade, because actually, I mean, the Plague Champion's anti-garrison options are actually better, the Blight Grenade as well as the Bile Spewer. But those are, I'd say they're less versatile purchases, and they're something that they're also less versatile and more situational, so you don't necessarily always want to get them. Like with the Plague Champion, you might really want to keep that Plague Bolter in Tier 1, and getting the Bile Spewer may kind of screw you up in that sense. Basically, just the Combi Flamer gives you an anti-garrison option as Chaos, an early anti-garrison option as Chaos. That's still just a good upgrade overall. That's hard to go wrong with, because you get that Combi Flamer, which basically doubles the Chaos Lord's range DPS, basically turning a melee hero into a ranged hero. And it's an upgrade that Chaos Lord players often get, even when they're not playing on a map that has garrison, just because it's a good upgrade. And Adila right now, he's really been harassing this side of the map a lot. Right now he's just kind of idling with his Banshees, and this is not a good situation at all. Ooh, alright, so good. Adila luckily is respecting the threat of the Banshees. I recently casted a game of the same matchup. It was Unalmat playing as the Chaos Lord against Soul Drinkers as the Warlock, and I felt that Unalmat, although a solid player, was not really doing enough of what he needed to basically respect the Banshees, respect the Warlock, and actually control that melee. Right now, if anything, it's Kisuke, so the way he's playing this matchup is a lot. It's actually, I'd say, he's the one who's being threatening with his melee. And it's actually Adila who has had to be very, very careful and has had to react and control Kisuke's melee. And we've been seeing him do that, trying to do that with things like the grenade. We saw that kinetic pulse that he used to protect his Banshees again when it looked like they were in a terrible retreat path. Right here we saw some Chaos Space Marines went for a force melee against the Dire Avengers, and they actually got grenaded in the face. And that's definitely one of the things that can be dangerous about these Dire Avengers. Unfortunately, these Dire Avengers are overextended, and Adila has definitely forgotten about them. If we see some Doom Blast right here, Doom Blast, please! And I'm also getting very, very disappointed in Chaos players getting Heretics in a retreat path with units and not using Doom Blast to absolutely gank units on retreat. And it's also a shame because, like, especially, I mean, like, to be honest, about like 7 out of 10 of these players who I'm saying this about are actually better than me. So I'm just a little disappointed that they're lacking that little bit of knowledge. Basically, just use Doom Blast on retreat. It's just really, really powerful, and you can kill so many things with it. Adila is doing a lot to make a lot of his squads a lot more resistant to that retreat damage, in part because he got a squad leader on his Dire Avengers, got a squad leader, no, not yet, just kidding, on his Howling Banshees, but he'll probably get one. He got one on his Dire Avengers, and actually, I think even if Kisuke used Doom Blast on retreat against those Dire Avengers, I don't think he would have wiped the squad. I think he would have wiped every model except for the squad leader, who is a lot tougher. And now we do see that squad leader on the Howling Banshees. So Havoc suppression going in, and that Havoc suppression is a great way of threatening those Banshees, and especially really, again, goading them into retreating. Because they don't want to let the heretics get into melee. Although the Banshees are going to fare a little bit better now that they're in tier 2. They do have their Exarch. I think, unfortunately, this Chaos Lord I think is really, really overextended. A grenade actually right now could kill the Chaos Lord. Unfortunately, let's see. Adila, I think he's going to get it. Oh, he does. All right, he does get it. So a very, very nice play for that Chaos Lord. And Adila is, I believe, an Eldar main. So I mean that was a beautifully timed grenade, and it's so much harder to use that grenade on retreating units when it's just a single model, or in this case a single entity. Now again, I cast a game of Unomat versus Soul Drinkers, and already I'm seeing Adila. Actually, yeah, I'm just seeing a lot more. I like what I'm seeing more in terms of these players doing what they need to do in order to effectively counter things. Like what I like is the choice of this Witchblade of Kurnos, because that is a choice that is incredibly threatening to all these heretics. Kisuke's heretics are not going to be nearly as unchecked as they have been, just because the threat of that Witchblade of Kurnos is huge to these heretics. That can really murder these heretic squads. Both players choosing to get Dreadnoughts, or Walkers rather, in tier 2. Right now, I was about to say that right now Kisuke has a slight advantage. Unfortunately, he has really bad positioning on his Tzeentch Dreadnought. His Tzeentch Dreadnought, although it's going to do way more AV DPS even than this Bright Lance Wraith Lord. It really needs to be careful. It really needs to be careful against this Wraith Lord, because the Wraith Lord is definitely going to win in melee, and the Wraith Lord, again, it can upgrade to that Bright Lance. The Wraith Lord also has more health. Now, this is a very close call. I think we're actually going to see both Walkers go down. Wow, so both Walkers went down. So that was very interesting, and there are times when I think part of what happened there is that both players recognized basically that they were in a situation where they were probably going to lose their Dreadnoughts, and they actually stayed in there despite knowing that they were probably going to lose their Dreadnoughts. And I think they stayed in there because they knew that there was a good chance that if they stayed in there, they would have taken out their opponent's Dreadnought. Whereas if they had actually tried to run away, they probably would have lost their Walker while not wiping their opponents, and that's huge. So there we do see some immolate to force this Bright Lance out of the building. And the Bright Lance these days is actually, compared to a lot of the other AV setup teams, it's actually quite a bit better in terms of once you actually destroy a vehicle, because you still get that Scorch ability. I believe it's called Scorch. That basically acts as a guide ability, similar to a Doom, similar to the Farseer's buffing and debuffing abilities, and that it increases damage that a unit takes. Ooh, and unfortunately, I think at this point, Adila dropping his micro a little bit. He does kind of get rushed by all these things. Ooh, but the Havoc's taking a lot of damage. And I wonder, unfortunately at this point, I think the Warlock actually cannot use, I was going to say, he was not able to use Ethereal Slash there from the Witchblade of Kurnos, because that ability is pretty expensive on energy. I believe it's actually something like 80 or 85 energy, so it does take a lot of energy to use it. But when you have it, it is such a powerful ability against, well, it's definitely a very powerful ability against heretics. It tends not to scale as well against the tougher melee squads, but it's still very useful for the control and the disruption. There we go with the Witchblade of Kurnos. I mean, actually, it did very well there against those Chaos Space Marines. Did a lot of damage, although it did not take out a model. So both players actually going into Tier 2, only choosing to get... They both got a Walker in Tier 2, and Adila also got the Wraith Guard. And he hasn't actually been doing a whole lot with the Wraith Guard. I think they did help him finish off the Chaos Dreadnought, and they did certainly scare that Havoc right there. But that Wraith Guard is definitely something that's... It's a scary unit, because it does such high damage. You can actually very quickly lose models and even entire squads if you're not careful. And the use of this autocannon by Kisuke has actually been very, very nice. Typically, an autocannon purchase, there are some risks to it. Usually, when you want to get an autocannon, it's because you want to get some... A lot of people will get an autocannon because they want to have something as a V. They also... But they don't want to give up the anti-infantry capabilities, because the autocannon can still actually damage infantry. But it does not suppress, and that actually really is significant, because it's still... It's an autocannon Havoc is definitely not as good as a suppression Havoc for dealing with something like a Warlock or a squad of Howling Banshees. Now, I think part of what Kisuke is doing to compensate for that is that he's actually using the suppression that comes with his heretics. Using that as a form of control, and then the Havocs can actually just do damage to the Banshees once they're just suppressed from basically from the heretic suppression. Then the heretics are doing a lot of damage of their own. Great Unclean One coming out for Kisuke. That's an interesting choice. I mean, both these players have been waiting a really long time, and so we're going to see greater demon units from both of these players. Which is... It's interesting to see that they really actually waited. I mean, they haven't actually been buying much. They waited for these big super units. And, I mean, these big super units, I think there definitely is some... A lot of players in 1v1 will tend to actually prefer the cheaper Tier 3 units, especially the tanks. And there's certainly merits to that, and in part because they are cheaper and because you can actually get them out quicker. That also means you can actually get out multiple of them. Some people would actually prefer to get 2 Fire Prisms instead of getting a single avatar. And 2 Fire Prisms is actually more expensive than a single avatar, but you can get that first Fire Prism out, and you can already have it working and helping you win the game, or just helping you win engagements in time that you would otherwise be waiting for an avatar. And then when you get 2 of them, that's also just very, very tough to deal with, especially the Fire Prism, but really 2 of any of the tanks or any of the Tier 2, Tier 3 vehicles can be very, very dangerous. That being said, something like this, these big Tier 3 super units, the Walker super units, the Avatar, and the Great Unclean One, they do certainly have a very, very different effect compared to something like a Predator or a Fire Prism. I would say that something like a Predator or a Fire Prism is inherently a bit more defensive than something like a Great Unclean One or an Avatar, because, in part just because they are a bit weaker. They can't tank as much damage, whereas something like a Great Unclean One or an Avatar, one of the things that you can do with a Great Unclean One or an Avatar is that you can exert a lot of pressure just by walking forward, because it's so tanky, or because they're generally so tanky that they can walk forward and actually just kind of put pressure just by walking forward, just walking straight into your line. And if you don't back off, if you don't start backing off, then they'll actually start using their abilities and actually starting to do a lot of damage to your line. Now, unfortunately, we see this Great Unclean One is already taking a huge amount of damage. And I think that is in part because Adila has actually had a lot of units that can actually do a lot of damage to this Great Unclean One. He has Banshees. He's got the Bright Lance, which also has that Scorch ability that increases the damage it can take, and he has the Wraith Guard. So Adila actually has a lot of things that can do a lot of damage to the Great Unclean One. So that Great Unclean One actually did not. It got a little risky at some point. It may not have been the best purchase. But at least it's still alive, and Kisuke is actually doing so well on resources that wow. I mean, if you were allowed to get another super unit, he would be able to get another super unit. As it is, Kisuke could get whatever he wants. He could get out a tank. I'm guessing at this point he's saving for Terminators. But I mean, he could get out a tank. He could get out any tier 1 or tier 2 unit. He's probably saving for Terminators, though. And that's probably a good choice. Adila, meanwhile, I guess not doing as well on resources, probably has a higher upkeep, courtesy of having more of an army already, or at least a bigger army. He does have, well, only a slightly lower rec income, but he's got a lot of resources himself. Actually starts a D cannon, which is pretty nice. They are in the late game. Adila is definitely winning quite handily on VPs at the moment, and he's actually about to, well, he's about to get a 1-to-1 cap, or right now he's got a 1-to-0 cap. So Kisuke is running out of VPs. That D cannon is something he can definitely use for VP denial. Meanwhile, oh my god, I don't even know what that was. That actually probably was the ethereal slash. And oh my god, also look at these Chaos Space Marines taking a huge amount of damage. They are now safe because the Wraith Guard finally got tied up by this Great Unclean One. But now the Great Unclean One is just taking Bright Lance shots. And Kisuke actually does have a double cap. Soon he might actually be able to threaten a triple cap, which is actually something that could really actually put him back in this game. He's low on VPs, but as far as engagements go, he's doing fine. And he did just get a squad of Chaos Terminators. Now, I'm not sure what he'll choose to get on that. Lightning Claws would actually probably be better than, yeah, and he's getting the Lightning Claws just in terms of that's really, really going to threaten the Avatar a lot. Teleports the Terminators out, he reacts. Very well done. And now he's about to upgrade to the Lightning Claws as soon as the Avatar is about to walk in and start attacking them. That's actually really bad news for the Avatar. But the Terminators need to turn around and actually just go for the Avatar. And I think he wants to also go for the Warlock maybe, but the Warlock is actually invincible because of Providence. Terminators do unfortunately get knocked down, and they still have to be careful about all the sources of damage that can take them out. And oh, the Chaos Lord goes down. But I mean, at the same time, they are actually putting a huge amount of pressure on the Avatar. Although I think they're pressing hard for the Avatar, they are really pressing hard for the Avatar. I think they're trying to go for a wipe on the Avatar. Is that an Eldritch Storm? No, that was going to be a single. Oh no! Wow, and if you'll notice, every single one of the regular Heretic models died on those Chaos Heretics. So that was a case where the Howling Banshees, or rather, geez, my brain is totally off. The Aspiring Champion pretty much saved that squad. And wow, I mean, look at how close this Avatar is. Kisuke is going to go for it, and I actually feel that's a really bad idea, because that base regeneration for monstrous creatures is actually really, really good. And if anything, I think Kisuke is going to risk losing his own Great Unclean One. He might get the map for it, but I think he's going to risk losing his own Great Unclean One, because already this Avatar is starting to regenerate its health. I mean, if we look at the health of the Avatar, why won't it let me select the Avatar? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this is actually going to be the Great Unclean One going down. Unfortunately, he's LOLing about it, but unfortunately very, very misguided to go for the Avatar like that. Yeah, he's going to lose the Great Unclean One. So he really, oh my god, we got the sync kill. Oh my god. We just had an Avatar Great Unclean One sync kill. So yeah, that was unfortunately very, very misguided by Kisuke. Because unfortunately that Avatar is a monstrous creature, it's not a vehicle, so it actually heals in base. And the monstrous creature healing in base is actually pretty fast. If you try to chase a monstrous creature in base, you will actually probably not kill it, especially something like the Avatar, which just has so much health. So, I mean, at this point, I mean, Kisuke is still doing so well on resources that he could probably get a new Great Unclean One if he really wanted. I don't know if it's the best choice, but it was otherwise doing, and he's getting a new Great Unclean One. It was doing well for him, but unfortunately that push was just so misguided. I mean, it's just, like, I saw that he got the Avatar, Adila got the Avatar out of there at 135, which is incredibly lucky. Because we're talking 135 hit points out of 5,600. That would have been 1 or 2 hits from the... That would have been 1 or 2 hits from the Great Unclean One would have finished off the Avatar if it had not gotten in base. But unfortunately, it was just... It got out of there. And I look at this now. Now we have an Avatar back out. So yeah. And I mean, that's something that I suppose maybe, like, Adila didn't know and he's going to learn the hard way. It is something that... The reason I know it is because I learned the hard way. I sent in a Blood Crusher to chase down a Carnifex at one point, because a Carnifex had so little health that it really seemed like I should have been able to finish it off, but the base regeneration was just able to heal from that. And I mean, that's part of what's going on, is that like, for one of the things that happens in this game is that players will try to back up regular vehicles into base, but sometimes you can actually chase a regular vehicle into base and finish it off, because a regular vehicle can just be finished off because it's not going to heal in base, because it's not a monstrous creature. But I mean, as we said, this was a monstrous creature. It heals in base. It looks like the game's actually going to end. It's been a pretty good game. I wonder if Kisuke will get a cap off at this point. No, he's definitely not going to get a cap. And a total miss. A swing and a miss from the Avatar. Although I do want to point out there just how powerful that that Ethereal Slash ability was right there against those heretics. They had something like full health, and this dropped them down to about 25%. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the cast. I do want to, like, I'm actually comparing this a bit to the game that I cast against, Unalmat against Soul Drinkers, and despite there being a bigger VP disparity, this was a match where overall Kisuke handled things about Eldar better than Unalmat did in that other game. Although, very unfortunate and misguided push with the Great Unclean One. Especially because it's very good to keep the Great Unclean One alive, because he can actually be very, very good for making a comeback, because you can use that foul snare ability. Basically, his abilities are actually very good for late game VP denial. Alright, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.